Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, attorney here in Hudson, Wisconsin with the Lohman Abdo Law Firm, and I'm the legal and government correspondent for the Western Wisconsin Journal. Today, my guest is an office holder, public official, politician, kind of, I guess, but and that's Cindy Campbell, the St. Croix County Clerk. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And we're having you on because I don't know if a lot of people know what the county clerk does. They may see you on TV. Do you get on with the county board? They're publicized, right?
Right.
Or televised, I should say.
Yes, usually with just the county board meetings.
Okay. So why don't we, first of all, you obviously work here in Hudson at the Government Center, and you've been the county clerk since when?
I took office in 2003.
All right, so you ran in November of 2002.
Yes.
And since taking that office, you've had to run for re-election first a couple times every 2 years, and then there was a constitutional change to a 4-year term. Is that correct?
Yes, right.
So you've had re-elections in 04, 06, and 08.
And 8, that was my first 4-year.
And so now you'll be up again in 2012.
Yes.
All right. Now, for whatever reason, they do still run those offices, these state offices, on partisan parties, and you will run on which ticket?
I run on the Democratic ticket.
Okay. And most of the other county offices are on the Republican side? Is it just the way that works out?
It is right now. The Register of Deeds ran on the Democratic ticket.
Okay. But now, some of the years, tell me again now, this coming in 2012, you'll be running for re-election, and what other offices? District Attorney?
That's a state office.
Okay.
And he will be up for re-election.
Okay.
The county treasurer.
Okay.
And the Register of Deeds.
All right. So those are in presidential years?
Yes.
And then the other ones in the gubernatorial years are?
The sheriff and the clerk of court.
All right. And there's a reason you're able to rattle off that election information, because election administration is one of your duties, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Now, we don't want to just focus just on election administration, but I know a common misnomer is people think that you're the clerk of court, and that's a whole different person. But describe the differences. What's the basic difference between the county clerk's job and the clerk of court's job?
Clerk of court is court-related. County clerk is not. It's more administrative duty, well, obviously elections and county board.
Okay. But you work with a lot of the county offices just other than the judiciary.
Yes.
And whereas the clerk of court deals just with the judiciary.
Yes, I would say so, and the judges.
And right. We get into a gray area like as probate, because that's in court a lot of times, but then there's other legal issues that are associated with that. So prior to becoming the county clerk, you did what?
I worked for an attorney for 11 years, and before that I worked for the county clerk in the 80s.
Okay. In the building we're in now taping this segment.
Yes.
Is that, okay. Well, now, how many employees do you have in your office?
I have 3 staff and myself.
Okay. Now, let's just go over not every single thing you do on a daily basis, but what are your primary duties, if you will?
Okay.
The job description, so to speak.
Sure. Mainly on election years, for election years, it's election administration. And this has been an unusual year for elections. Normally in odd-numbered years we'd have 2 elections in the spring, but we've had 4 this year. And so in the even-numbered years we plan on 4 elections, and that does take a lot of time in my office to prepare for the elections. And I've said no matter if it's the spring primary or the November general election, it's still a lot of prep time for us.
Okay.
So.
And so your office, with as few staff as you have, you're basically overseeing all the municipalities to make sure that they're get the documents they need and that have the procedures in appropriate form?
Right. I wouldn't say overseeing. I work with them. The municipal clerks have their responsibility at their level, but we administer, and I make sure that ballots are provided, election materials are provided, a lot of communication with them to make sure that we are following the changes that we see in elections. It's just a lot of communications with the municipal clerks and working with them on elections. So.
Okay. Now, other areas besides elections?
Sure. County board administration, working with the supervisors, working with the chair. In addition to that, of course, that's preparing notices, meeting notices, notifying the media. That is a responsibility that we have in sending notices to the media so they get in the paper and noticed properly. And then the county board, I clerk for the county board and also take minutes. And another staff person in my office works with the agendas and also takes minutes for a committee. Do you want me to go on with other duties that we have?
Yes, sure. What are the primary ones?
Well, in addition to the county board, we have, of course, keep minutes and agendas on file in our office. And I make sure proceedings are filed for the county board. Other statutory duties, marriage licenses. We issue marriage licenses. It seems the summer, June and July, and now September and October are very busy months for marriage licenses.
So marriage licenses are not administered by the clerk of court, even though some judges conduct marriages.
Right.
Okay.
Right. We issue the licenses.
All right.
So we make sure that the applicants have what they need in order to issue the license. Certified birth certificate, identification, residency, required depending on where they apply. If they reside in St. Croix County, and they're getting married in Wisconsin, they apply in St. Croix County. So,
okay.
Another change in 2009 was the domestic partnerships that came through. We issue domestic partnership certificates and also terminations. So since the beginning of that, we've issued approximately 24 since 2009, and that number has just gone down. 10 and 11, I think we've done 2 this year.
Really?
So, dog licenses. I can say that what we do, nothing seems to be really related together. So it's like I have a list here, so I
now,
understand why
do
we
municipalities, some municipalities do their own, and therefore you don't have to?
Well,
or
actually,
is there
for dog licenses, we're responsible for distributing the licenses and the tags to the municipal treasurers.
Okay.
They actually issue the licenses, but somehow it has to go through our office to get to the municipalities. And then we also receive the reports. We manage the dog license fund, and from that fund, we pay for supplies. We pay any dog damage claims that may come through, and then money gets paid back to municipalities.
And there's no big push to have cat licenses, equal time for cats?
Not for the county.
Okay.
I think some local municipalities license cats, and I don't know how they do that. So,
okay.
In addition to that, I get served with claims on the county, and so I'm responsible for distribution of that and then filing those claims in the office.
So an example, I mean, there's been some quite highly publicized claims, particularly deaths that maybe have occurred like in the jail or whatever.
Right.
That would be something then that usually an attorney's office serves a notice of claim on behalf of that claimant.
Serves on the county clerk.
And so it serves it on you? Okay.
Yep. And then I file them, and then it just goes to the corp counsel and notice to the insurance company. So. Some other things that may not be known what we do is we process farmland preservation agreements. Don't have a lot of that. Some of the laws are changing on that, so I can't really go into detail on that. Some people were surprised that we process wood cutting notices. And what that is someone wants to cut wood on property, they would send us a notice. We would check with the treasurer's office on any taxes, and then if there are none, then we issue notice to that property owner, the DNR, the municipality, and the individual who's requested that. So, statutory, that's a statutory duty. Filing probate claim notices, we receive notice and then we notify various offices in the county if there's any potential claims that they would have for that. In addition to that, we file several contracts and leases and agreements with the county. I have files for that. Some do, some don't. I don't get all the health and human services agreements, but we do get several agreements. Just county contracts, and they're on file in my office. In addition to that, I maintain budgets for the county board, county clerk elections.
Okay, well I want to talk about your budgets, and you also had mentioned about the county board meeting notices. Now, the county board members are elected officials.
Yes.
You're an elected official, yet you're taking the minutes from the meeting. So what determines like your duties for them, and how much overlap? And then there's the county administrator who's not even elected, and that's an
Right.
appointed position.
Right, which is a new position. So I guess statutorily I'm the clerk for the county board. So I'm in every county board meeting. Depending how the offices are structured, I'm not required to take minutes in committee meetings, but I do. And administration is the committee that I take minutes in right now.
Okay.
So, which works a lot with the county board, and I'm familiar with what's going on when it gets to the county board.
Well, when the county board went from 36 to 19,
31.
I'm sorry, 31 to 19. I know I was going to get that number wrong. But it's much smaller anyway, so
It
not
is.
quite a 50% reduction, but close.
Right.
And so what did that make for your workload go down a third then at that point, or?
I wouldn't say, no, I wouldn't say the duties went down.
Okay.
What did decrease is per diem requests. The supervisors are entitled to a per diem and mileage reimbursement for meeting attendance. And so that budget item
So depending on
went
the number
down.
of committees they're on, they may get more money, and depending on how close they live to where the meeting's held.
Right, yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
So that may have been reduced because you got fewer people requesting. There's fewer committees as well, wasn't that true?
Yes.
Okay. And so a little bit more centralizing of the leadership.
Fewer committees, but the committee sizes increased for three of the committees. They went from 5 to 7 members. And then Transportation, the Highway stayed at 5, and then Health and Human Services has 9. So, and they have 3 citizen members, that's why they have 9. So.
Okay. Now budgets, you mentioned. What kind of size of budgets do you oversee? And what are they budgets for?
Okay, county board and committees and commissions, and that's mainly county board chair per diem is entitled to a stipend. In addition to that, it's per diems for committee meeting attendance. Conference attendance, they do attend Wisconsin Counties Association conferences, and there's the annual fall in September. Any types of supplies, well, office supplies and postage, and basically those, which is every office has that, and any new equipment that may come through in a need that we budget for, but it's all approved by the chair and county board.
Okay.
So, in addition to that, I have my own budget, the county clerk budget. Basic, again, salary and fringes, basically, is what it is. And then,
Well, what are your, first of all, this position, that salary is set just prior to the election?
before papers are circulated, nomination papers are circulated,
Okay.
they have to set that.
Okay, so papers get circulated in June, typically? May or June?
That's
For
what it has
November
been, but
election?
I believe it's going to be moved up because they're moving the fall partisan. There's talk of moving that up. I don't think it's been set yet, but they're going to move that from September to August.
Okay.
So it will be an earlier deadline for nomination papers.
And so then for your position, your elected position, it currently pays
Annual is $61,000.
$61,000. And then that has stayed flat, though, during the term that you've been in there?
It was set in 2008, and that's no increase.
Okay. So how much money then do you oversee with the various budgets between
Sure.
the county clerk and the county board? And
I have county board at approximately $134,000, county board and committees and commissions, and that has been reduced about $15,000 with the county board reduction.
Okay.
Okay, and that was done by referendum in 2008, and that it was effective in April of 2010 with the elections then. Okay, county clerk, I have about a $276,000 budget. Elections And that does vary based on the number of elections in a year. I have an estimated budget of, for 2012, $188,000 for elections because of the 4 scheduled elections. Recently reviewed the proposed budget with the county administrator. I'm budgeting for 4. We don't know what's going to happen next year. I budgeted for 2 this year, and we had 4 elections, so I'm obviously over budget for elections this year. Last I checked, it's about $22,000 over.
Well, but that's going to be the same for all county clerks in the state.
If they had a recall, right? Not every county.
Well, that's
had
true,
that.
and not everyone did. But
Right.
A lot of these districts, even if it's part of a county, it's
Yep.
going to have
Yeah.
some extra expense there.
Right, and the recount of the Supreme Court recount was also, you don't budget for those, and that was another surprise this year. So.
Now, we have roughly, what, 80,000 in the county?
Yes,
Is it
83, 84.
84,000 population. So those amounts for either the county board or the county clerk's office, are those kind of typical or comparable on a per capita basis to other counties?
You know, I have not compared with other counties. I typically don't. And for the budgets or for the elections or?
For
I
the
guess-
budgets,
okay.
just particularly.
I guess it depends on the size of the board for counties. I really have not compared with other counties.
Yeah,
so.
all right. Okay, so with all these various duties, and I think you may have mentioned it, but the one that I see most frequently seems to be folks getting their passports.
Right, and I didn't get to the elective type of duties. We are an acceptance agent for passports, and so we can take in new passport applications for new applicants, and that generates revenue for the county clerk's office.
I was more curious because I can't remember what it's up to now for a passport. Do you know?
Right, it's $110 for a passport book.
Okay.
And then they also offer the card. I should say 110 for if you're 16 or over, and then it's 80 if you're under 16. But they're good for 5 years if you're under 16, 10 years if you're over 16 and over. The passport card, which is limited to land and sea travel to Canada or Mexico, are 30 for 16 and over and 15 for under 16. So.
Okay. And so how much of that 110 does the county see?
We get 25 per application.
Okay.
And that's not part of the 110
Oh,
fee.
it's not?
No,
Okay.
it's a separate fee that comes to us, and so that's what we get. Now we had big years in 2006 and 7 and 8 with processing passport applications, and that's kind of gone down. But I looked today, and I think it was in 2006 or 7 we processed 3,500 applications.
So is that comparable to prior years? Or a little
No,
bigger
just
than-
because of the requirement that came about, that they had to have a passport in order to get out of the country. Used to be just birth certificate was
sure.
sufficient, and now it's the requirement to have the passport.
Even to go to Mexico or Canada, you have those land and sea, you called it?
Yeah, land and sea travel to Canada and Mexico a card is sufficient. But
Okay.
if you ever fly out of the country, you need a passport book.
Okay. Well, just out of curiosity, and I didn't ask you this ahead of time, but as far as the revenues generated by the county clerk's office between marriage licenses and fees and permits and dog licenses, you mentioned it, about how much money is generated for the county from your office?
Well, it depends on, of course, the year, but
I'm sure it fluctuates. Yeah.
Right, and the other things that we do, title transfers, temporary plates, work permits, validating ATV, snowmobile registrations. What else do we do?
Fishing licenses?
Nope, we don't. We do
You
no
don't do
longer
that,
do
okay.
that. No, but we also part of our fees, depending on the election year, we get requests for voter lists, and we charge a fee. That's a rate that's set by the state. So depending on the election year, we'll get a number.
So was it a good year for requests for voter lists?
Not this year.
Oh, okay.
Usually in the even years, we'll have a little bit more requests for that. But it's what they're looking for. Because of the voter registration system, we can print reports that voter turnout, who voted in which election, whatever they choose, and actually provide it to them on an Excel spreadsheet, which they probably use for mailing lists too.
So out of all of those different areas where possible
Right.
fees could come into the county, do you know about where that sets as far as in the revenue side?
So far this year, we've collected about $60,000 in Yeah, 60,500. I budget around 80, and I think that's a little low right now because I think we'll be above that. And so I also do chargebacks, I should mention, in the spring elections because we have a consolidated ballot where we list in the spring elections we have any state, any nonpartisan state, county, local offices, municipal offices, and school. I will charge back to the local offices, local municipalities and school districts because we have a consolidated ballot. So we're paying for those coding costs and ballot charges and things like that. Years ago, you may have received a ballot with state offices, a ballot for local offices, and a ballot for school, but now it's just consolidated.
Okay.
So.
Interesting. And what would be your most frequent contact with the public?
Oh, frequent contact. We have a counter at our location at the government center. We're an information counter. We have public constant stops by the public, and either passports, car titles if they're coming to us, but just direction in the government center. Looking for various birth certificates, register of deeds. A lot of court, just directing them up to the second level for court-related matters. So.
Public records requests. I wonder how, I know that can be both a good and bad thing. I mean, we like to pride ourselves in Wisconsin on the open records law and so forth, but there have been instances of nuisance. Is that an issue here in St. Croix County? Has it been isolated problem, or is it something that takes a lot of time of your office?
I have not received a lot of requests. Up until this year, there were requests with regard to voter records, and they're from various groups, and it was targeted throughout the state of Wisconsin, and so I can't even remember what the requests were, but it was pretty specific to the spring election this year, and a number of voters and various documents that I have. Otherwise, it's mainly the municipalities that have that. So.
Well, they had that issue down in Waukesha where that was thought to be a close election, then all of a sudden, 5 digits worth of ballots are all of a sudden found, and it just widened the lead in the Supreme Court race. You haven't had anything like that happen here in St. Croix County?
No, I can say that what I get on election night, they're unofficial, and that's what's posted on the website. I have been given wrong amounts on election night, and we pick that up in the canvas. Okay. It's just, for whatever reason, if they're tired, I don't know, but we do check. We have various checkoffs that we do throughout the election night, because I do ask on the night of the election the total number of voters. And what they how they report to us on election night from every polling place is we have the optical scan systems, and in St. Croix County the majority of them have that, where they're modemed in to the county's computer. The touchscreen voting equipment is a manual entry for us, so they have to report that either by fax, which is a form I provide to them, or they call it in. And so we're entering those manually, and sometimes we've gotten results maybe that have been combined with the two, and so that's why we check. You can't have more votes than voters, that's what we look for.
Sure.
And it's happened, and so.
Or a large discrepancy voting for one office versus another from the same municipality.
Right, and so we do look at that. We're very busy. We have about an hour and a half of just straight phone calls and getting the results in. But we're checking, and we're looking, and we're getting numbers, and we're calling back. And it doesn't happen very often. It doesn't, but we do check it, because we're asking for the total number of voters. We're asking how many people voted on that touch screen. Because if you're giving us 100 voters on that, and you're giving us 200 votes, then you've totaled the amounts. And they're told. It just happens, but not very often. But we do catch it.
Well, and I want to conclude with the subject on the elections, because it is something that tends to get a lot of press. But um, for all the votes that are cast, there's very few mistakes that I've seen, made. But you're always going to have human error.
Yep.
And I was curious, from your standpoint, would you see that more technology is a good thing? Is it making the results more accurate and clear to report, or because there has been a little bit of backlash to technology, and go back to the good old, X in the paper, but it seems to me that that's also fraught with opportunity for being interpreted by individuals, and anytime you get a human involved, it would seem possibly to increase that error.
Right, and there has been, and the only way we know is through recounts, because that's the only time we look at the ballots. And the changes that we see, and I'm going to use the spring recount with the Supreme Court race as an example, are absentees. Some changes where they should have been rejected because the certificate wasn't witnessed, it wasn't signed, something like that. We had minimal change. I think it was, 7 votes, 11 votes, something like that, change in St. Croix County, which wasn't uncommon throughout the state to have those kind of changes. So some tallying errors do happen in hand count. We still have 5 municipalities that have paper ballots, that use paper ballots, plus they have the touchscreen voting equipment, which every polling place is required to have. The Help America Vote Act, and what that touchscreen voting equipment does is enables everyone to vote independently. So if you have a disability, you don't have to be assisted, you should be able to use that equipment. So every polling place has that, but we still have polling places that have paper ballots. Most are optical scan and the touchscreen voting equipment.
So even though the people are putting pen to paper as opposed to touching a screen, even the pen to paper, at least that can be optically scanned. And
well, if you have the optical scan system.
Okay.
But we still have the smaller municipalities that don't have that. They have paper ballots. I can tell you right now that the majority of them use the touchscreen because it does tally for them. They're not hand tallying as much as they used to without that.
Okay. Well, and then the one other change in the law that affects your job would be that you may have had a lot of calls about, and that is the requirement for a voter ID, a photo ID.
Right.
Again, very politicized issue, and I don't want to get into the pros and cons, not necessarily so much, but what impact, if at all, does it have on your job and maybe the municipal clerks that you work with?
Sure. The recall elections this summer, the election officials were required to ask for it, but the voters were not required to show it, and they had a handout for them. It's education, it's communication through the state, from me to the municipal clerks to the election officials, and I think this was a good practice for what they're required to do in 2012.
Okay.
And so people, if they didn't show it, they were told, you're going to have to next year.
Along with that, I know there was concern because they've changed also how students vote. Now,
Yes.
St. Croix County doesn't have necessarily a large, we have the University of River Falls, but it's mostly, they vote in Pierce County.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that this happened to my son, where he voted in Menominee for the fall election in 2010, but then when he went to vote here at home, he had registered and voted before that at home here. And so then they said they had taken him off the list because he had voted in Menominee, and so that if he wishes to vote at home, he needs to keep voting at home and or request an absentee ballot and submit it to Town of Hudson rather than vote in Menominee. Otherwise, it'll get switched again.
What he'd have to do to re-register is show them, well, he could register now, there's no elections, but in the late registration period, you have to show proof of residence for 28 days. And so it used to be 10 days, now that's a change again this year. And so proof of residence is what he's required, but in the if it's not in the late registration period. So right now, if he were to register, proof of residence wouldn't be required because we're not in the late registration period or not close to an election date.
So the proof of residence needs to be submitted even if they have the student ID?
It's my understanding the student ID does not have an address on it. I believe a receipt from the university is something that they're looking for.
Okay. And even the student ID won't be good enough unless it has the date of issue and the expiration date on it?
Okay, are you, confusion between photo ID and proof of residence. So
Okay.
are you talking
All
about
right.
photo ID?
So that's a good point, is that those are two separate issues.
Yes, and it's been
The residency is the one that the typical people say, well, I'll bring my water bill down and somebody to vouch for me. Can they still do that?
They can. There's no more corroborator. They used to have a corroborator could say, yes, I know this person. They've lived there for at least 10 days, and then they would sign the voter registration. That's no longer an option. They have to show proof of residence that they've lived there for 28 days in order to register to vote. Now, photo ID is something that they have to show at the polls when they go to vote. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not the same as proof of residence. So it's a photo ID. It's a government-issued ID.
Well, and can they still register and vote on the same day?
Yes, they can.
Okay.
As long as they show the proof of residence, that they've lived there for at least 28 days, and then in order to vote, they have to show ID.
The better option, especially in a presidential year, because I've been at those polling places on election day, it can be quite hectic, is to register prior to going to vote.
Yes.
And establishing your name on those voting rolls.
Right.
Then it's just a matter of showing your ID at that point.
Right.
But people should be aware that it's a little more tricky this year because of the longer residency requirement.
Yes.
And what's going to end up happening is that we're in obviously an odd number year this year, but in 2012, students going to, whether it's Stout or River Falls or Eau Claire, and they show up and they want to vote in that primary in September, they're not going to be able to because they won't have lived on campus for 28 days prior to that primary.
I don't know what the registration date would be, but where do they live? Their residents still in the town of Hudson?
Okay.
They register to vote, they can get an absentee ballot from the clerk.
So it's going to, but it's going to require, it's going to cause them to have to get an absentee ballot from where they're home, or as opposed to being able to vote in the university town where
And they could do either, but they can't do both,
Right.
depending on where they live. Personally, my kids, when they went to college, I was pretty clear that you're going to maintain your St. Croix County residency and vote in St. Croix
Vote for
County.
Mom, right?
Yes. That's what I told them, yes.
Right. Well, that's good advice. I think better to be safe than to find out on election day that, well, I'm going to have to. It's because too late to request an absentee ballot by that point.
Yes, that cutoff was earlier is also a change for this year. You used to be able to vote in person in the clerk's office up until the 5 p.m. Monday before the election. That cutoff is now Friday.
Okay.
Before the election.
The Friday before the election, Tuesday.
Right.
All right.
Right.
Well, good to know. And is there a website where folks could go to learn more about either the county clerk's office or these election rule changes?
Sure. Well, we have the St. Croix County website, and I have my own page out there. It has all the duties. It has forms out there, mayor's license information, the election information. I pretty much link that information to the Government Accountability Board Elections Division website, because the changes that come through, that's more up to date than what I could keep up. So I suggest going out there for any election information, and they have a very good website with forms. You can get registration forms, you can get absentee.
So the link is on your website.
Yep.
But what's your website then?
The county website is www.st-croix.wi.us.
Okay.
CO in there, sorry.
And if they're having any problems with the dashes and the dots,
I Google.
Just Google St. Croix County Clerk, correct?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, very good. Well, Cindy, thanks for coming on the show,
Yes.
and maybe we'll have you on again to find out how this was all implemented in an election year.
Oh, sure, that would be fine.
All right.
So, okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, viewers, for watching another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I hope you learned something today about the county clerk's position in whatever county you may be watching the show. And again, contact your government officials if you have questions about what they do and how you may be able to be helped by that particular office. For now, this is Jamie Johnson signing off for Western Wisconsin Journal.